Hey, Chris.
Yes.
I just wanted to double check to make sure to see if you guys were talking because those of us on the live stream couldn't hear.
We are not. We're waiting on one member to
just,
join Zoom, and then we'll get started.
Okay, just wanted to double check. Thank you.
Yep. It should be.
I would like to call the policy meeting to order. At this time, we will, I welcome each of you for our meeting this evening. I believe we have a quorum now. We have Mr. Dunton here. We have Mr. Silver, and we also have Mr. Edwards on the line. So we have a quorum, and we will begin our meeting. The first item on the agenda would be our minutes from our last meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? If not, the minutes will be approved as read, as presented, rather, excuse me. The next item on the agenda would be policy updates. And I turn it over to Chris.
Good evening. We have got several policies that are North Carolina School Board Association policies that we're going to talk through first. There are 6 of them. The first one we'll look at is policy 1610-7800, professional and staff development. And I'd like to call Christy Grant forward because the changes are in reference to mental health, and she can talk through those for us.
Sure. Good afternoon. So the changes to policy 1610 just add the requirement that the school system provide the mental health training. And the mental health training was outlined in our mental health plan that we presented, I think, 2 committee meetings ago. So it just adds a requirement for that and then updates the legal references as they pertain to the state board policies and the general statutes. Any questions?
Is this the one that I think July 1st is the deadline in order to have that plan in place? Or am I thinking about another one?
Yeah, right. The actual mental health plan is in a policy we're fixing to do in just a little bit. This is to add the training component to that for the mental health training program that was outlined within our plan. So we have requirements that we have to do every year in terms of building up our staff capacity to understanding the needs of our students with mental health needs.
So we're just able to move that plan into this deadline.
Absolutely. Yes, sir. Any other
Are
questions?
there other questions?
Yes, ma'am. There's one. If it's due by July 1st, do we need to skip the 30-day process and have it approved at the next board meeting?
Our mental health plan that was already approved by the board at the Student Services Committee meeting and then the board meeting 2 times ago was already approved by the board. So y'all had already approved that. This is just actually adding it now, the training, the mental health training program requirement into one of our board policies.
But with the change, we still would.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Approve the policy as a working document for us rather than have it lay on the table for 30 days.
And we'll start the training in August when we come back. We have our training plan to roll out in August to our staff.
And we will meet in.
So we have a meeting on July 19th that we've added policies to that meeting.
Okay.
So they
So we
could
need
be.
to add this.
Mhm.
We need to add this.
So just to clarify, are we waiving the 30 days or not? I don't
Well,
believe that we would have
We would
to.
need to.
Okay. When are you starting the training?
In August, when the staff comes back,
Okay.
Well,
it's the first 2 weeks during those work days.
Yeah. Oh, actually the August meeting would not be 30 days after
Right.
July 19th. So
Right.
yes, you are right. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we will waive 30 days.
That it for that policy?
We're good. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean, for asking that question. I hadn't thought about that. All right, the next policy, Chris.
Okay, the next policy we have is policy 3300, school calendar and time for learning. And we have got Robin Griffin on Zoom with us, who is going to talk through the changes to this policy.
Good afternoon. Yeah, so most of the changes to this policy, first of all, don't really apply to us. We use the hours calendar, and we've been very proactive in our planning around using the hours calendar. One of the things that happens after the first part of the school year, after schedules are sort of steadied out, is that Mr. Whitley works with each principal to make sure that the length of the school day is a minimum of 6.25 hours, and that documented through Power School, the requirement being 6 hours. So since we have already transitioned to an hours calendar and we calculate our hours down to the seconds practically, we're good on that part of the policy. The other part of the policy change is in response to a Wake County adjustment where they were collapsing what would have been like schools that were doing multi-tracks, in those cases 4 tracks, down to 1 track. And so what this policy now allows those districts that do multi-tracks to do is that they do not have to follow the legislation 115C as long as their track that they identify is equivalent to one of their other tracks, if that makes any sense, which we don't do track schools. So, or year-round schools. So that's not really an issue for us. So the pieces on here that were changes don't really apply to us. And the parts where they delineated with more detail around the instructional hours for the hours calendar, we had already done. So our suggestion is to accept this policy as it is submitted by the School Boards Association.
And just to add, this is one of the policies that we had made a temporary change to. So this will also remove that temporary change.
Yes.
Are there questions?
Just as an additional comment, there are a couple of pieces of legislation right now. Senate Bill 654, I believe, does have a couple of additional calendar requirements, but we can address those until that piece of legislation is finalized. So we may have to come back and slightly revisit at some point in the future, but not until after that has been, not until after all of that conversation has been finished.
And actually, Lindsay, is that the reason for taking the more detailed logistics out of the policy itself and instead saying that we will align with legislation?
Yeah, that's exactly right. That way you don't have to go back and change the policy every time the legislation changes.
And it does still reference 115C. So instead of putting the verbiage from 115C directly in there, if you need to know, you go back to 115C. And Ms. Nancy Smith and I did check, and in the previous versions of this on our policy side, we did make that the reference to 115C an active link to that legislation. So we do suggest that we still do that.
Are there other questions? Next policy, Chris.
Okay, the next policy we have is policy 4400, attendance. And we've got a group of folks that have been working on reviewing the changes to this. So.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Policy 4400, attendance. There has been quite a few changes to this policy, so I'm going to try to walk through them as succinctly as possible, the changes. The first being, we've added that school administrators shall communicate attendance expectations. And Chris, is there any way possible you can click as we go along so they'll see? Thank you. So that was added. Move down to the yellow. That's another portion that was added. And that section, this next section, that entire section has been deleted. Some of this language or some semblance of this language you will find down further in the policy, but it was this particular section of it was deleted here.
And part of the things that were deleted from it were, again, the temporary COVID-19 adjustments to the policy for remote learning as well. So that's been removed.
Thank you, Dr. C.
Yep.
So if we move down to, says principals shall ensure teachers keep accurate records. We can see what was added here. Students will be considered in attendance if present at least half of the instructional day on site. It's important to note K-8, our elementary and our middle school students, we take daily attendance for, which is different when you go to the next part, our 9-12 students where we take period attendance. Whereas at the elementary and middle schools, we're taking daily attendance. At the high school level, we're taking period attendance with students having those 4 distinct classes.
Mr. Farrow,
Yes, sir.
just if I can real quick, I know I'm reading this wrong, but in that highlighted area, we're saying 2/3 of the day. In that next,
And a half.
we're saying a half.
Yes.
Which one is it?
So it's
So for the daily attendance, it's half a day. And again, that's our K-8 students. So because daily attendance and this in alignment with the student attendance accountability manual. Thank you. For counting daily attendance, if the child is there for half of the school day, then they're counted present. When we're looking at individual class periods, we've gone 2/3 of the class period, which has been a practice that we have used for some time. So in a 90-minute class period, if a child is there at least 60 minutes of that class period, then they're counted present.
Is there a way to clean it up just so it
Yeah.
reads a little better? Or, I mean, I think that's a little confusing if someone were to pick it up and read through it.
Yeah, because when I first read it, I picked up the same thing and I made a note, question that, because if you are not actually part of the system, you won't know that when you read this policy.
So I mean, we like to actually label a time frame.
If you want to specify 9/12 is period attendance based on
A 90-minute.
a 90-minute block. A child would be 60 minutes, but that would only be 9/12 on
Right.
K-8.
I think just starting this document with that being your kind of third header, you're assuming that applies to everybody. Can we just strike that or move it so it?
Or if you just add with the, where you have the 2/3 of the school day, it's not really 2/3 of the school day, it's actually 2/3 of the class period.
That's how it reads. 2/3 of each class period.
Yeah, and if I could, this document here is slightly different than the one that was sent to you. There are some slight changes which may have clarified some of that. So,
I can't,
Mr. Farrow, if you could read
Okay. Yes. So the
exactly what it says.
accurate attendance record in each class, K-8 students will be considered in attendance if present at least half of the instructional day on site in the school or at a place other than the school attending an authorized school-related activity. 9 through 12 students will be considered in attendance if present 2/3 of each class period on site if the school or at a place other than the school attending in an authorized school-related activity.
well, that answers the concern that I had. That makes it clear.
Okay.
Okay, so
Can I
I'm
ask
good.
Can I ask a quick clarifying question? Is that section at the very top still in there? So if we go up,
Read that one too. No,
I
it's
see.
not.
All right,
They
so yeah,
also
that's been
adjusted
changed.
the
Okay.
language to that.
okay, that was the only thing. I just wanted to make sure those were consistent.
Mr. Farrow, could you
So
read the second paragraph as well? I'm
Yes.
sorry,
So
the
at the very
third.
top, says to be counted present, a 9/12 student must be in attendance at least 2/3 of class period. All K-8 students must be present at least 1/2 of the school's instructional day to be counted present for the school day.
That does it. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, Dean.
Hey, just one quick question, if you don't mind.
Yes, sir.
How does this apply to early college?
It would be the same. Now with their college classes, that would be, I guess, a little difference. Dr. Catalano, being the principal there, you can answer that question.
Right. So the attendance in their college classes is guided by the syllabus that the professor provides to them because they don't take period attendance in the college classes. And that actually goes for the dual enrollment, all dual enrollment classes, even those that are taken at the traditional high schools.
And so is that anywhere in our policy that at that moment they have to follow the college curriculum?
I don't know if it's in our policy, but isn't there a manual for
Chad, that's in the memorandum of understanding, is it not? Right, that's in the MOU we have between Nash Community College and Nash County Public Schools.
And that's good, but where do the students see that?
Could you repeat that?
Where does the student see it?
So they understand that they got to follow the college arrangement at that point and not so much our arrangement.
Right.
We can't hear
Can
you,
you come up
Chad.
here, Mr. Thomas?
That each school has a student handbook as well that details those logistical, that logistical information in terms of the class attendance and things like that for college classes. But
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was going to say is that each school has their own handbook that will outline that, but we can double check that and make sure 100% that it's in there. But that's where we would find that, but definitely in our MOU as well.
Okay, just as long as the students and the parents there still understand that, you know, they're guided by almost by two policies.
Yeah, we'll just say, I want to look at it and make sure. Yes, sir. So we can definitely get that information if you all need to see it as well.
May I make a comment?
Can I?
Yeah, go ahead, Reggie.
Thank you, Mrs. Bullock.
I'm
I
sorry.
understand what Mr. Edwards is saying. It would be great if it was in writing for all parties to understand that, even though I understand that the college kids at the early college go by a different handbook or whatever, but I think it would be good to be spelled out here in some kind of way for everybody will be on the same page. That's simply my take on that.
So are you all requesting that something be placed in our policy concerning attendance for early college and city high in terms of when they're taking college classes?
I'm suggesting that. I think it would be good. I don't know if that's exactly what Mr. Edwards had in mind, but to me, the clearer we are, the better we are.
Yes, that's exactly what I have in mind, because if you don't fill in the gaps, somebody's going to fill in the gaps for you, and it might get ugly.
Can you make a note there for us to?
so do we want to table this policy or?
Why don't we? Because because the information that you read,
Yes, ma'am.
I don't see it.
It's on the first page, page 1.
Sure, help me.
While they're looking at that, I also wonder if phrasing it dual enrollment classes, that way you would blanket cover all.
So why don't we do this then?
What's up there is not what was in.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So
that's,
why
yeah,
don't
what
we
was,
just
what was,
table
what's,
this
what's.
policy
Okay,
for till next month?
right. We can add it to
We're not even
the
seeing
July
your
meeting.
Anyway,
I agree with that. I think it will be, if we can make it clear and work on that for a better flow,
yeah.
better understanding. I agree with Mr. Edwards on that.
Well, let me go back and ask some more questions now that we got that straight. What Mr. Edwards and Mr. Silver are saying is that the guidelines that the early college, for instance, has for students need to be incorporated into this policy. Am I understanding that correctly?
That's how I understood it.
Is that what you all are saying?
That's
Ms.
what I'm
Edwards?
saying. Yes.
Mr. Silver,
Yes, ma'am.
I'm wondering if that won't make this policy a bit cumbersome, would it?
Well, it depends on if we got it in another policy, which I think we probably would if we're doing BCP
Yeah,
and
dual
CI, and I'm, yeah, if you want to reference that, but I'm assuming we probably have it in a policy, but it falls under something else.
Yeah, so if we're looking at early college and city, it would probably be good if we include what's dual enrollment, because that also falls with early college and city, and that would include our traditional schools as well
Okay.
for college classes at Nash Community.
So that actually would fall not necessarily in the meat of this policy, but it would have a different heading altogether. Is that what I'm understanding?
Good.
So we do
Just
have,
I'm thinking that parents who don't have their child in early college would really not be interested in reading. If they're trying to find something that pertains to their child, they are not going to be interested in reading through a lot of other verbiage that really does not address what they're looking for. So if we put that in this policy, I think it needs to be under a different subsection altogether. Does that not make sense?
Evelyn, what I heard Mr. Ferris say, I think though, is that if you're in the early college city,
You got it.
this applies to you for your Nash County public school student, but they also have time in class at the college.
Right.
I don't think we should put the college's policy in here. I mean,
That's my point.
they're going to need to communicate with Nash Community College or whomever the instructor is in order to get that
And
isn't
not
part
to
of
jump
ours.
in Mr. Thompson Kool-Aid, but one of the things that I know the early college and city has in place is when they have their meetings with each student. I know they walk through the difference in when they're in the school setting of the early college or city and when they're taking courses at the college. And I'm sure that that is somehow given to the students and those families in a handbook, because they meet with every child and every parent who are coming into those programs, correct?
that is correct.
And that's what I'm questioning, like whether we need to have all that included in this policy,
Well,
or can it not be done either as a subsection if we must, or if it's already in a policy that does not need to be incorporated with this one?
Excuse me.
I just understood it that if you are in one of those programs, you're covered here.
Right.
And I think what Dean was saying, all right, well, it happens when you're a student of Nash Community College. Well, that's their policy, that's on their side. I wouldn't think we put that in here because we're not creating that. It changes. We don't want it in. I thought it was kind of two separate things.
Yeah.
Well, it is two separate,
It
I'm
is.
sorry, I'm just going to interject back. It is two separate things per se, but should a student of ours go through that program, they're still graduating from our school too. They get the diplomas at the same time, or at least the same week. But we're still responsible for them somewhere along the way. And I would dare say if it was to come up about a question about policy per se, at least you'd be able to find, and it's referencing, and we're including them into our policy. And I don't mean to make it very hard. Just a separate subsection. If you wanted to break each section out, like the K through 8, the 9 through 12, and then college courses as required by the community college system for whatever program it is that our early college students are in. It's just 3 subsections. And then right under that, you can make a table that shows the 3 separate sections and then the requirements so that it can be visual. That's all I was recommending.
So there's a policy 3101, dual enrollment, speaks to the college classes specifically. So attendance is different, as Lank was sharing. The attendance is dictated per program, per instructor at the college level. So outlining it in our policy may be difficult. In terms of an attendance policy. Policy 3101 does ask that, or does require that students receiving credit towards high school graduation, the school at which the course is offered, so the college must provide essential information for their transcripts and school records. And that information includes a description of the content, the number of hours of instruction for the course, the student's achievement or performance level in the course. In addition, the syllabus, which is where the attendance would be outlined, that includes goals, objectives, course activities, and grade requirements should be provided. So that policy itself speaks to the dual enrollment attendance.
So Dr. Catalano, I think it'd be perfect if all you had to say in this particular policy that we're looking at is, for college courses, refer to policy 3101. And that's all you'd have to say.
And that makes sense.
Right.
That makes sense.
I will make a note, and when we bring it back to you, we'll have fixed that language.
Okay.
Yeah, my thing becomes, the simpler we make it, the better off we are in the long run.
I wouldn't want all that stuff in the policy.
I would like to make a request, if possible, if we could continue going through this policy, because with the exception of the changes that we just read and one other small change, everything you have there in front of you, so we can get any feedback, so we can be working on it when we bring it back the next time, if that's possible.
We can wait till you finish.
Okay.
I think that's what you're asking.
Yes, ma'am. I just want to.
Honestly, I might add.
Good for you.
We'll hold our questions until Mr. Farrell finishes, which makes sense.
No. I'm good with the questions. I just want to make sure I can continue, because I want to get your feedback. So when we take it back, you'll have all your thoughts.
Oh, we can, yeah.
Okay. So I think, Dr. Catalano, we are on.
Late attendance and late arrivals and early departure.
Yes.
Where are we?
B, late arrivals and early departures.
Okay, gotcha.
And so this just talks through the process for what students are supposed to do and how students will be held accountable if they arrive late and if they are dismissed early from school. And I'll give some wait timing as you all are looking through.
I don't think that one had any of the changes. You had highlighted those in.
Okay. Excused absences, they added there in excused absences, they removed physician and added healthcare practitioner, so that it's not just a doctor who can give a note due to illness, but it could be a nurse practitioner or someone of that nature. And if we scroll down, Dr. Catalano, to number 2. Where you at, Dr. C?
Where are you at?
I'm at number 2.
Here?
Yes.
Okay.
So this is the isolation order by the local health officer or state board of health. I'm not sure what they moved. I think they added that the local health officer, yes. I'm not sure what they removed. I think they may have just added that.
Would that be the health department?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And number 5, replace participation with attendance at the proceedings of a court administrative tribunal if the student is party to the action under the subpoena as a witness. And then going down, there's a section there that was deleted. On the school-related activities, replace all classroom activities are important and difficult, if not possible to. I got on glasses. So under this section, it says, while recognizing the importance of classroom learning, the board also acknowledges that out of classroom school-related activities can provide students with valuable experiences not available in the classroom setting. So really talking about those activities that may be outside of the classroom and how, which one of those would be considered excused or part of the extended activities for learning. And then it has here students participating in disciplinary techniques categorized as in-school suspension will not be counted as absent. So if a student is assigned to an in-school suspension program, whether in the school or outside of the school setting, that student will still be considered present. The next section is makeup work. And I'll let you all give you some wait time to read through that. And if you have any questions.
If we already had the information, then we don't need wait time because we should have already read it. You can just tell us and move on.
Okay.
Rather than wait for us to reread it again, we
Okay.
should have already read it.
So for this particular section, the major part in here is for our students. Well, there's several major pieces, but one of them is for our students who have not met the immunizations requirement. If those students are suspended from school, not allowed to come because they have not received their immunizations, then those students must be allowed to make up work if they choose to do so. And the other part is that when students are absent, that they must have an opportunity to make up work. And the principal, in working with the teacher, will determine what that time frame is. Going down to where it starts, any school disciplinary consequences for unexcused absences will be consistent with Section D of policy 4300. And basically what it says there is that you cannot suspend a student for more than 2 days for skipping class, leaving school without permission, that kind of thing. And that is in alignment with state law. The Innate Section in yellow, it defines what student chronic absence is and defines it as a risk factor for adverse outcomes. Talks about the requirement of the school to track rates of students' chronic absenteeism accurately and consistently. Again, it defines what a student chronic absentee is. And that is a student who's enrolled in North Carolina public schools for at least 10 school days and at any time during the school year, and whose total number of absences is equal to or greater than 10% of the total number of days that such student has been enrolled at such school during the school year. And then going down to special circumstances, it just talks about in situations where students should not be penalized for being absent. One of those is with students who have chronic health problems, where it says no penalties will be imposed for absences due to documented chronic health problems. And number 2 is students experiencing homelessness. We added a section in there that's not on your sheet, so I'm going to read this to you. It says, once a family's living arrangement has been established and transportation provided as applicable, all attendance policies will apply unless there are other documented hardships to the established living arrangement. So basically what we're saying there is if a student is and their family are experiencing homelessness and we're finding out about it and they miss 5 days of school while they're adjusting to their current reality, then that student should not be penalized for that. But once living arrangement has been established for that student and we have bus transportation and they're back in school on solid footing, then the attendance policy still applies at that point. Down at the bottom of appeals, again, talks about absence may impact eligibility for participation in extracurricular activities. Principals shall inform students and parents of the applicable attendance standards, for the various types of extracurricular activities, including interscholastic activities. And then it tells you also to see policy 3620. And then we have some cross references that were added there, 4300 being one of them. And other resources is the North Carolina Department of Instruction Multi-Tier Systems of Support Implementation Guide.
Do we have questions about this policy? Other than we are going to table it for our next meeting.
Yes, ma'am.
No, ma'am.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Next policy, 6120.
Thank you, Leland.
Thank you.
Okay, we've got Christy Grant here, back with this one, 6120 student health services.
Sure. For the Student Health Services Policy 6120 in Section A, the changes, they've changed drugs to add the word medication. And again, you'll see doctor has been changed to healthcare provider. So those are all the changes in Section A. In Section B is a new section that adds the school system mental health plan. So there was a new section created specifically to put in the state board policy requirements for our school mental health plan in there. And then the legal references were updated at the bottom.
Are there questions for Christy?
Yeah, that's mine the last go around.
All right, next policy then, 7510. Thank you.
Okay, we have Sheila Wallace here to talk us through the changes to the leave policy 7510.
Good afternoon. So there are a few changes to the leave policy, and it speaks to the temporary requirement related to COVID. They have removed for employee health certificate, and the beginning of that part of the policy remains the same, but they also recommend to remove will be required to provide a health certificate from a medical profession as a condition of returning to work following isolation due to COVID-19 symptoms or exposure. Then if you go down to the last sentence, they are also removing the remainder of the 2021 school year or until repealed by the board, whichever comes first. Those are the only changes to that policy. Are there any questions?
What exactly is a health certificate?
Health certificate is that when you return to work, the doctor gives you a certificate letting you know that you're cleared to return.
Ms. Wallace?
So is there like some type of health certificate standard?
No, originally when we had employees that were out on COVID leave, they were required to bring us some notification that they had been cleared by the doctor to return to work. So they're removing that statement for the remainder of the year and this policy moving forward for now.
Sounds good to me.
Is there, I know this is to return to work, is there any kind of documentation that is required in order to start the clock, whether it's any of the three cases here, exposure, positive test, or symptoms?
Yes, we have a protocol in place. Normally, we do the background tracing, which falls underneath our nurses. We also have a connection with the health department, or if they have some type of notice from their doctors stating that we need to adhere to the policy. Then the employee completes the paper trail. We get it approved and give them the days that they need in order to quarantine.
That's when the clock starts.
Yes.
Until that point at which they return with that
Correct.
certificate. Thank you.
Mhm.
So, Ms. Wallace, this has not been a large problem for Nash County schools in terms of
I
our
wouldn't
personnel.
say that. I wouldn't say that, but we have managed to.
I guess I'm asking to get clarity as to whether or not it has been a problem.
It's been a lot of paperwork, I can say that.
Really?
And the nurses have really been busy with making sure that we're following the CDC guidelines and the proper protocols for tracing and ensuring that these people were eligible for the leave that has been set aside for them.
Has participation been good with our employees in terms of following protocol and being in order?
Oh, yes, we haven't had an issue with any of that.
Good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there other questions? If not, policy number 8341.
So we have got Joyce on Zoom, and Sheila's going to remain. Oh, no, Joyce is here.
Okay.
Joyce can come on down.
Want me to start it?
Okay, this next policy is,
So this next policy is the limited claim settlement. There are multiple changes to this policy, beginning or focused primarily on the settlement, which is section C. I'm going to read this information to you because there are a lot of revisions here. The resolution of claims requires the exercise of discretion by the board. Therefore, to treat similarly situated claimants who are alike in all relevant respects alike, the board will be consistent in its settlement practices by using the factors listed below to evaluate all claims. The board recognizes, however, that separate claimants often will be dissimilar with respect to one or more of the relevant factors, so the final decision regarding each claim will be based upon the specific circumstances. All factors need not be given equal weight, and no one factor will be controlling. So it removes the verbiage at the end, speaking about the settlement, the claim prior to filing of legal action that the board will adhere to. I don't know if you have it on separate pages, but beginning with number 1, that factor has been removed. Whether there is a reasonable responsibility that the potential defense costs to be paid by the board, including an estimate of personnel time and school system resources, will exceed the amount for which the case can be settled. There are some changes to factor 2. Whether there was a negligent act or omission by an employee or agent of the board has been added, and the removal of the extent to which an employee's actions or omissions may have caused or contributed to an injury. There are some changes to factor 3. We will keep whether an employee, an ad, or an agent of the board intentionally caused an injury. There are some changes to factor number 4. This one has been added all together, whether an employee or agent of the board violated any board policies. There are changes to factor 5. We removed whether there are any affirmative, but adds what if any defense are available to the board in the event of litigation, and the viability of those defenses based upon the facts known at the time of settlement consideration, and removing from number 5, however, the board will not assert or consider the availability of sovereign government immunity for any pre-litigation claim. 6, 7, and 8 are all new additions. The claimant's likelihood of success in litigation, the likely cost of defending the case, the administrative burden and disruption that litigation would likely cause. Number 9 has some changes we will keep. Whether demand is within the retention or deductible level for monetary payments pursuant to any applicable insurance, add liability, coverage agreement, or claims management agreement, and whether there is or is likely to be coverage under such agreements if known. Add 10 and 11 factors, goodwill on behalf of the citizens of the school community, and the best use of public funds in an effective manner. And remove each claim will be evaluated based upon the specific circumstances. All factors need not be given equal right, and no one factor will be controlling. And we're also removing City of Greensboro and adding Clayton versus Branson and that documented numbers. Questions?
Does anyone have any questions for policy 8341? If not, thank you.
Thank you.
The last policy is policy number 2300, which is an update, and we will do that policy separate from the ones we just discussed. And we will also not include policy 1610/78 in the motion to approve policy 3300, policy 6120, 7510, and 8341. If there's a motion to approve those policies.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve policy 3300, policy 6120, policy 7510, policy 8341. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Aye for me, motion carries. Now we go back to policy 1610/7800. We need a motion to recommend approval for this policy to the full board and waive the 30-day wait.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we recommend to the board policy number 1610/7800 for approval and waive the 30 days. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Motion carried. And we all agree that we will table policy 4400 for our next meeting. Now, the last policy for discussion is policy 2300, board meetings. Chris?
So this is a policy that we actually pulled and noticed that there was just a slight difference in what the policy said and what our practice has been. So in section B of this policy, where it speaks to regular board meetings, we typically do not have a meeting in July. And we have traditionally approved the board meeting calendar for the calendar year as opposed to the fiscal or academic year. And so we just adjusted the policy to be consistent with what we have been doing. In talking with Franklin Lamb, he thought it might be a good idea to continue to go ahead and approve for the academic year the calendar. So these are the adjustments that have been made. The board will hold one regular meeting per month, August through June, each academic year. Each year during the regular meeting in June, this year, to catch ourselves up, we will bring this in July to the meeting. The board will adopt an annual schedule of regular meetings, including time, place, and each meeting. So Sarita is pulling some dates to cover us from January through June, which will come in the July board meeting.
Are there questions?
It seems like I heard Rod and maybe Lindsay can speak to this. Just say something. Yeah, we haven't met in July. That has been our practice. It's the practice of many boards, but it's more of a waiver than just not setting a meeting that month. Like I didn't know if it would make a difference to say July through June of each academic year, and then and I guess that was more of a legal thing as opposed to what our practice has traditionally been.
So Lindsay, could you speak to that?
Yeah, sorry. And I'm pulling up the statute now because I want to go back and take a look at the statute because I need to remember because, by statute, you do have to have board meetings, and I can't remember. Give me 1 second. I need to remember whether it specifically says you need to have a board meeting every single month, or if you can, and if you can, you can waive it, because I think that goes to what Link is speaking to, right? Is that whether instead of setting by policy that we're only holding board meetings for 11 of the months, that we're going to hold board meetings for all 12 of the months, as required by statute, but that we're going to waive our, board meeting in July. And I just, let me pull up the statute. So give me 1 second.
I just noticed another July down here where it says work sessions. Each year during the regular meeting in July, the board will adopt. So we need to make the same change to the work session, whatever language we agree on in B. Let me pull that up.
So Rod was saying to waive it, right? That would just waive the meeting based on.
He said something like, you have traditionally, and a lot of other boards do as well, not meet in July, but we needed to have it as a scheduled meeting.
But then you can go back.
Yeah. And that's how I would phrase it as well. I'm not necessarily sure I would change the policy language because, and again, I think a lot of boards do this, and I don't know that, like, for all practical purposes, I don't really know if you ever got challenged on it, really what would come of it. But technically the language of the statute says that local boards of education meet on the first Monday in January, April, July, and October of each year, or as soon thereafter as possible. And however, a board may elect to hold regular monthly meetings and then obviously to meet at special session as needed. And so just given the language of the statute, I think it's probably fine to waive your July meeting if you're having your regular monthly meetings, but I'm not sure I would necessarily codify it in your statute, in your policy.
Okay. So taking out then August through June each academic year. So we won't add that, but where it says each year during the regular meeting in July, That's what the policy currently says. The board will adopt an annual schedule of regular meetings. So could we just say in June, the board will adopt an annual schedule of meetings and then just change that word, just the month? That was a-
That's a Lindsay question.
And you're asking whether it's okay to have to change the wording from July to June in that particular sentence?
Correct.
Yeah, I don't see any reason why you can't go ahead and say that in June we're gonna set our schedule for the next year rather than in July, since we're thinking that we may, waive our July meeting or cancel our July meeting.
Okay. That's the only change in this policy, is it not?
Correct.
Yeah. Are there other questions? Hearing none, is there a motion that we recommend to the board that we approve policy 2300? Do we need to have this lay on the table?
So moved.
Hold on one sec. Then I carry that. Do we need to waive the 30 days? No, you're fine. I'm the one asking the question out of order.
I mean, Lindsay, what do you think? I mean, we've already missed the June meeting, so we were going to bring it to July 12th, bring the calendar to the July 12th meeting. But Lindsay, do we need to waive it or just let it go?
I was trying to find my unmute button. So you've already missed the June. So you were gonna bring the calendar at this July meeting. I mean, if you're going to be approving the calendar at the July meeting this year, then you don't necessarily need to have this policy in place by then. So I don't really know of a reason why you would need to waive the 30 days in this particular case.
Okay. We have a motion on the floor and a second that we recommend to the full board that we approve policy 2300. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Motion carried. Those are the only policies that we have on the agenda. Is there any other business for the policy committee? Hearing none, I declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Y'all have a good night.